Hi, I'm Jeff Strong. I'm creator of the auditory brain stimulation therapy, rhythmic entrainment intervention. And I'm also co-founder and creative director of brainshiftradio.com. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about how changing a rhythm a little bit can have a pretty big impact on what our brains do with it. I'm going to look at a theta-driven tempo. So we're going to be an inwardly directed state. I talk about different tempos in a lot of my videos, and I talk about entrainment. Entrainment is the idea here that we can drive the frequencies of the brain with the drumming tempo. And different tempos have different effects. So for instance, if we're playing really, really slow at say about 4 beats per second, this is the low end of a theta state of consciousness. Theta is an inwardly directed state where meditation, visualization are enhanced. The low end of theta is really about deep meditation. There we can play a very simple rhythm, very repetitive rhythm to get the brain into it. A rhythm very steady like this. That will drive the brain just fine. As we speed up the rhythms, we need to add some musicality to it. We need to change the rhythm a little bit. And so if we get into 6 beats per second, which is a mid theta, here we're looking at creativity, intuition, and we need to have some sort of a variableness to the rhythm. It doesn't have to be changing constantly. It just has to have kind of a groove to it. So I can play something like this. And that would be just fine. I go a little bit faster. Now I need to start changing things a bit more. I need to create some variations on the groove that I'm playing so that it keeps the brain engaged. Keeping in mind that the slower we go, the more repetitive it can be. The faster we go, the more variability and complexity it needs to have in order to keep the brain engaged enough to entrain and then do what we want to do. So that's the broad stroke of what happens with tempo and being able to accomplish very specific brainwave states. There's another level to it, and that has to do with what we can do with the rhythms when we get in there. And I talk about this a lot with rhythmic entrainment intervention because a lot of what REI is about, especially our custom program, is about using very particular rhythmic passages, complexity in the rhythms to stimulate the brain. We treat it as exercise for the brain. And as someone goes through a program, they're getting more and more complex rhythmic patterns to stimulate the brain a little bit more each time. And we call that progressive stimulation. And that's what allows us to create long-term change in the long term. But if we're looking at being able to do something more immediate, like we get with BrainShift Radio. BrainShift Radio is 7 categories in music where we have a whole variety of different tempos and rhythmic passages, and we do an ambient instrument track to kind of modulate and moderate the rhythms. But the drumming rhythms are all over the board depending on what we're trying to accomplish. And where you're going to use different levels of complexity or difficulty in deciphering for different purposes. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about what happens when we're looking at problem solving, creativity. This idea of being able to kind of come up with answers to a problem that are outside of the expected, kind of make some logical leaps, being able to think outside the box, for instance, being really creative. In order to do that, I want to play a rhythm that isn't too regular or isn't so predictable. And I want to do an experiment with you in this video where I'm going to play one rhythm. Both rhythms I'm going to play are going to be at about 6.5 beats per second. This is the mid end of the theta state of consciousness. This is where problem solving is optimized between 6 and 7 beats per second. And I'm going to play one rhythm that's just really straight ahead. It's a 4/4 rhythm. It's a combination of a mambo and a samba. I'm going to just play that rhythm without changing it. It's going to have a groove to it. So it'll get your brain entrained to this mid theta state of consciousness pretty well. But it may not do much more than that because it's very regular. You can tap your foot to it. It doesn't take long for your brain to decipher the pattern. It's familiar and you can pick it up. You know it's going to repeat. You know what it's going to feel like. And so you settle into it. You entrain to it and it doesn't do much more than that, which is pretty good. I mean, just being able to get into the mid theta state of consciousness can open tons of doors. But what if we made the rhythm a little bit more difficult to decipher? Not much, but just a little bit. Would your experience be different? Well, we're going to find out today. So I'm going to play for a couple minutes this rhythm that's kind of a combination between a mambo and a samba. It's 4 beats long. You'll be able to tap your foot to it. You could count 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. It'll be fairly familiar to you. It'll be very comfortable. Maybe just sit back, close your eyes, listen to the drumming, and think about a problem that you've been trying to solve at work or something. Some issue that you have a question about that you haven't been able to figure out. And just kind of let it settle in the back of your mind and see if you come up with any answers. And then I'm going to stop and I'm going to play another rhythm that is just 2 beats shorter. So instead of being in 4/4 time, which is what this first rhythm is, this rhythm is going to be in 7/8 time. And so it's not going to be something that you can tap your foot to. It's not going to be something that sounds like regular music. There's going to be a familiarity to it because I'm playing the same basic rhythm, but I'm cutting out 2 beats somewhere. So between these two, all I'm doing is taking away 2 beats to kind of jam this passage together. And you're going to see it feels very different. It sounds very different. Your brain's going to have a harder time being comfortable with it because of dropping those 2 beats is slightly jarring because you're used to something in 4/4. We all are. When we listen to music, popular music, we're listening just to music that primarily is in 4/4 time or it's in 12/8 time. It can be counted 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or 1 ta ta, 2 ta ta, 3 ta ta, 4 ta ta. And we're used to that. It's very familiar. We can get into a groove with, we feel like moving, and we kind of let the rhythm settle in the background because it's very regular. It doesn't take a lot of effort to determine what's going on. When you put it into 7/8, which is a really simple odd meter when you think about it, it's just 7 beats long. It's shorter than a 4/4 measure, which is 8/8. But once you take it out of that roundness of the 4/4 or the 8/8 and make it into 7/8, now all of a sudden there's this jarring quality to it that makes your brain stop and think. And it's harder to decipher. This engages you in a different way. This will engage your neurology in a different way. So as I play during that passage, put that same question or a different question in your mind and just see how your brain treats it differently. You may be making connections that you're not used to making. Something a little different. Maybe you're thinking deeper or you're thinking more abstractly. I don't know. You'll see how it feels. But I'll play in 4/4 and then I'm going to play in 7/8. So here we go. I'm going to play in 4/4 and I'm going to play in 7/8. I'm going to play at 6.5 beats per second. If you're setting a metronome and you want to play this by yourself, if you're a drummer, you'll want to set the metronome to 97.5 beats per minute, and you want to play 16th notes. So you're playing 4 drumming beats to every click of the metronome. That's going to be 6.5 beats per second. So playing 4/4 first, I'll play for a few minutes, I'll stop, and then I'll jump into 7/8. Okay, I'm going to chop off 2 beats in this pattern right in the middle, and this will be in 7/8. It goes like this. Well, I imagine it probably feels a little different one to the other. It's possible that you didn't really feel much difference at all. So I've included a couple downloads. If you're on my blog site, you'll find a couple downloads below. One is the 4/4 version of this for a few minutes that you can play around with. The other is the 7/8 version that you can play around with as well. Give it a try a little bit here and there. Spend a couple days playing the one or the other and just see how much different they are for you. Everybody responds a little bit differently to this. And generally, if I'm playing for someone or if I'm doing a recording or a guided meditation around this, I will vary the rhythm a little bit. So I'll take this as a basis to draw from, and then I'll improvise around it. But for this experiment, I thought it'd be cool to just keep it really straight ahead. If you want to play around with this, see how these feel over time, go ahead and do the downloads. If you're on my YouTube channel on Facebook and you want to get these downloads, click through to my blog site. Thanks for watching.